Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are here watching on YouTube, you can find out more about Office Hours and how to sign up at officehours.global. We spend the first hour talking about just general media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we've decided to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about Zoomtopia. A lot of us have watched it or watched parts of it. And so we'll talk about our impressions of how they did and what we saw that was new, and also possibly dig into some of the production as well. So stay tuned for that. If you'd like to join the panel or be part of this panel, all you gotta do is raise your digital hand by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We do mic checks to make sure everyone sounds relatively like each other and everyone's ready to go, and we have a nice smooth show. Then you can learn that if you're an introvert like me, the easiest way to meet lots of people is to speak in front of them, because then you don't have to introduce yourself to anyone. So that's the trick of the trade. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you who put questions in. We're going to start this morning with Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas. And Paul says, I went to update my iPhone and it pushed iOS 14.8. Yet I'm seeing on Twitter that there are a lot of folks getting iOS 15. Does anyone on the panel have 15?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I've got it on one machine or one phone. It's actually in beta build right now, and so you have to sign up to be a beta tester to do so, which isn't difficult to do. As for the 14.8, it's very encouraged to do it now because it's about a security flaw, and I think that iOS 15 hasn't addressed that security flaw yet, so that there might be a 15 beta build coming very soon for that.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I have 15 on both iPad Pro and phone. We went to Gold Master this week, so it's pretty stable now. I have the beta for an app that I produce, and it's been pretty clean. The one feature I really wanted, which is the universal control, they've not shipped yet, but it's pretty stable.
Are there any key features that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I think I use my iPad Pro when I travel. I travel every other week, and I have the keyboard. And I have to tell, the multitasking is really got very good. Now I can sit on my iPad Pro and have Exchange on one side and a document on the other and work really consistently.
Go ahead, Victor.
Yes, iOS 15 is coming out on the 20th. So I would definitely get on 14.8 and then just go ahead and wait for the public release, or a couple of days after, which is what I tend to do.
Yeah, I usually wait at least a couple of days. I have a couple of phones for a variety of reasons, and so I update slowly. I have one of the phones get it, and then we go, let's see how this goes, and then we start to do it. Usually what you want to wait is there'll be a 15.1, and that's usually like, oh right, we forgot that thing, and that's usually the time I jump on for everything. All right, next question.
We're moving on. The next question comes to us from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. And he said, though NAB Show itself is canceled, NAB says there will be options for accessing select show content virtually through NAB Amplify. What might this look like? And NAB just says to stay tuned.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So about a week ago, when I said that I wasn't going to go to NAB, they said, well, stay tuned for NAB Amplify, which kind of concerned me a little bit, because I would figure that they would have probably already had something in place. And I'm really concerned that they've got no preparation for NAB Amplify. I have a feeling that it's going to be a dumpster fire at best. That they didn't just say, hey, we're canceled, but NAB Amplify, just go register over there.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, a friend of mine says often, hope is not a strategy. And this is evidence of that. I think they hoped everything would work, but it's clearly just, it's not going to work. But the most important thing is that in the next 3 months, I think we all need to be pushing anybody we know that works at these big companies to say, rethink the future. Rethink the future. We can help you do it better.
And again, use the second hour to let me know which vendors you want to have on. I can get anybody on. So we can. I have confidence that any vendor we want to see. I know AJA is very high up on the list, and we'll probably see from them. Someone from them. But Stuart, you can't ask about sign-on. Can't ask about that camera. Can't ask for that. You can't do that because it's not any fun for them. So anyway, so but yeah, so I think that we need to intensify what we're doing in the second hours and really find the folks that we want to interview. I still feel like right now our second hours are the best place for a vendor to go and the best place for us to learn about their products because it's just that it's all of us kind of ganging up and and thinking about it, and it's a lot of really thoughtful questions. So go ahead, Bill.
I was surprised that they didn't do a little more with Future Media Concepts, who's done post-production world for the last 10 years. And at least we know, because they've done other things, that they know how to do a digital-only event. So I'm shocked that they didn't just say, hey, guys, we've got a team and we know how to do some of this. They couldn't be able to scale entirely up. But if they're trying to do an entire digital thing from just the NAB suite, that's going to be a disaster. I agree.
I wouldn't be surprised if FMC didn't want to do that, because, you know, if you're not going to be able to do something well, a lot of times you're like, okay, I'm not, you know, they don't want to be part of a dumpster fire. And so handing something, if you're a smart vendor and someone hands you something at the very last minute that you don't think you can execute, don't execute it, you know, because it's your brand, you know. And so I think that it may not have been NAB's choice. I think my guess, it would be, if there's not a lot going on, it's FMC's choice, because doing a virtual event is not something you do in a couple of weeks. It's something that you plan for a couple months, and you work with all the folks and you make sure that they're all connected. And there's a lot to it to make sure that it works. I've spoken at some of the FMC events, and it takes time to, you know, get everybody ready to go. And I think that they just didn't have it, or they don't have it. And if they may try. Yeah. Jeffrey?
So I know that Pepcom doesn't do NAB, but I know Showstoppers does NAB, and so I'm going to wait for Showstoppers to come up with some content, and probably talk to Steve on them about that.
Yeah, they've actually done a pretty good job. They've been doing a lot of virtual stuff, and they've been figuring that out fairly effectively, to the point where, again, you wonder whether you need to go to anything if because Showstoppers keeps getting better at just, you know, making it available for folks. Next question.
Timo Gallegos in Austin, Texas is up next. What would be the most essential equipment or tools required in order to be helpful as a remote assistant is something like the Project Belfast?
And we're calling it the Belfast method. And the reason we're doing that is because the Project Belfast is something different. So we don't want to get connected to it. So, I mean, like, it's not bad, but it's just like, yeah, we'll call it the Belfast method. Anyway, go ahead, Rupert.
It will obviously depend on exactly what role you're going to contribute, but the basics are obviously reliable bandwidth. If what you're going to be doing requires the VPN connectivity, then you want to be sort of pre-prepared with whatever VPN tools you're going to need to get into be connected there, and make sure you're familiar with troubleshooting those. And then comms. So I think they're maybe using Unity comms, so try and get familiar with that and have, you know, whatever hardware or headset you're going to use for comms, and just be comfortable with using that.
Go ahead, Jim.
Right now, we just add to that a wired Ethernet connection versus wireless. And I think everything else was nailed by Rupert.
And the best thing to do is to make sure that you're here in after hours to watch it actually happen. So, you know, just watch for a little bit. And if you want to get into it, there's places to find. There's going to be more and more options within different people's shows and Office Hours 2.0 for you to get involved remotely. And most of it will require no hardware or software that's specific other than your computer. So definitely just keep watching it and really absorbing what's happening. Next question.
Scott Mueller comes to us from Germantown, New York, and asks, does someone who wants to set themselves up to do remote mixing via Streamweaver need to have a bunch of different mixers to match what is being used on site? I have an X32 compact with an Dante card on back order for my home studio.
Go ahead, Victor.
So first of all, if you're going to use Streamweaver, you have to have a software client at the distant end, like Andy built for my show, where you could control through OSC certain commands for the X32. So we're doing that very little for my show. A much highly recommended method would be to use a VPN with X32 edit and then remote mix that way. We've proven that with Jim and Mickey, and it works perfectly fine. So if you're strictly talking about mixing, do it that way. And you don't necessarily need Streamweaver. But if you are talking about show control of multiple things, such as audio and camera control, etc., then you're going to want to use definitely use that software. It's fantastic.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida is up next. This Zoom hotkey pad was referred to on a Zoomtopia session, and there's a link at the bottom. Can anyone comment on reliability?
I can comment on the fact that that I can't get that link to go anywhere. So I'm not sure what we're referring to there. So let's go to the next question.
Okay, Timo Gallegos back in
Oh,
Austin.
Sam, I'm sorry, Sam. I didn't see you there. Sam, go ahead.
I hadn't clicked it yet. So I can talk just a little bit about it. So it is by PowerBX. The thing I'll say about reliability is that pad is Bluetooth only. Its connection is Bluetooth. It is battery powered. So take that for what you will. It's Bluetooth. It's sitting on your desk. It's close, but it's not a hardwired keypad. The only other thing to note on it is there's a Mac version and a Windows version because it's very hard coded onto the key commands. Very, very simple, very easy to use, not configurable.
Got it. Very good. Thank you. Next question.
Timo Gallegos then sneaks in from Austin, Texas again with, in the Tony Mobley production last night, how and who was controlling the audio levels?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, last night it was Chirig, and so the audio comes in NDI. It's isolated from a Zoom room, and it goes into vMix. And they were just manually doing it, but typically we would have something like this little APC, little MIDI controller, and be sliding these up. Greg Gibson was also on that show watching, and he was saying that he loves the Behringer X Touch, so that would be the other piece of the puzzle. But yeah, it was Chirig that was riding those.
How did the show go yesterday?
I thought it went well.
I was in meetings until late, so it went well.
Yeah, I would have liked to have pushed out in 4K, but Jonas was on another production, and he's usually our encoding engineer, and so we just spun it off. We didn't spin up his other encoding instance. Instead, we just pushed right from that same production machine. So vMix was doing both the cutting and the encoding as well. So it just went out 1080, which was okay. I mean, it's not like everybody's using fantastic cameras. And well, Talalik was on; he was using a nice camera. But yeah, I thought the graphics is something that was lacking. We would have liked to have had. There was a couple times when there was a person that was referred to. There was a pilot that would have been a nice graphics to pull up, and I was just wishing we had somebody like Aaron Husledge to punch that in. There was some talk about maybe doing something like that in here, where we just have like a machine that just sits there that people can pump graphics into, and then it's up to whoever's cutting the show to take it. But it's there, like that device that was just the Zoomtopia. What was that mute device? That was just somebody to push those in all the time, and then it's up to the operator if they want to take it or not.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's what we're hoping to do with 2.0 as it rolls out, is to have a team that's just working on the graphics live, and then those are just available to the PD as needed. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Alan and Heath had a case study of remotely mixing a conference over VPN, and he's got the link there. Could the same methodology be applied to music or other types of content?
Yeah. yeah, pretty much. That remote mixing is something that is totally doable for almost anything. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. I mean, it does create an odd thing. We were having a discussion with someone, and they were like, "Well, who's going to be mixing?" I said, "This person's going to be mixing." Said, "Where?" So they're going to use this room. I'm like, no, they're going to be at home. We were like, we don't even think about having them in the room anymore, or we think about it very little. We do still have the people in the room that could step into it. I will say that for physical events, we still have somebody around that knows enough about the system to step in and make it happen if something went sideways. But for the most part, it's the remote becomes more and more important. Go ahead, Chris.
If you've ever worked in a TV truck that's parked outside of a building, you don't need to be at the location to do the job. You can mix from a little box that's, if the little box is 150 feet away, why can't it be 150 miles away?
Well, the funny thing is that we oftentimes talk to people when we load into locations. They go, "Well, do you want to be in the room next to it, or do you want to be in the room?" And I'm like, "Not really." Like if we can not be in the room, that would be great. Like you can put us somewhere else in the building. They're like, "Where?" I was like, "Anywhere we can run our fiber, you can put us." I'm being there. I mean, if there's some reason I have to run to the stage, but that's very rare. I'd rather not be that near to the whole space. Next question.
Comes back to Timo Gallegos in Austin, Texas. Is there any way of having a low volume or high volume banner that pops up on screen like the Tony Mobley production team used last evening? It was very effective and easy to see. It could be very useful for after hours or any production.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I won't speak to the way it was done on Tony Mobley's show last night, but yes, it is very easy to do. That is H2 graphics from John Barker with just a ticket. I literally typed that while I saw the question in the queue, and that's coming in from a Mac Mini's output screen scraped via the NDI utility from NewTek into vMix and then just brought up as an overlay. So yeah, it's really easy to do.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Sorry, Andy Carluccio did a quick test where he created a different type of WL emitter, and I'm not sure where he landed on that, but it definitely had a too high, too low option to that, and so it's being some people are working on it.
Next question.
Luca Pasquale Giannini is our next questioner from Montreal. Good morning. What are office hours plans to bring all episodes to a podcast? I often listen to a YouTube reply on headphones, and most of the time I don't need to have the TV on.
Coming soon. So it'll probably be to the Apple Podcasts thing. So it'll probably cost a little something just because you have to charge something for it, but I just don't want to deal with the RSS. But that's most likely what we're going to do. But Nikki's been building it for a year, and I just haven't gotten it out the door. So anyway, so it's coming very, very soon. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, how often should I test or exercise my UPS universal power supply batteries? What is the best procedure for lead acid batteries? And I should note the individual battery voltages for a health indicator?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, most UPSs for this level of operation have 12 volt gel cells in them. The common ones are the 7.2 amp hour ones. I would say that before any production, when you're going out on the road, you need to test those. I would run them down a couple of times to see, and with a stopwatch running, to see how long your system works on those, so that if you do have something go wrong, you know exactly how long you've got to fail safe over to like a replacement system or to hand off control to somebody else at a different location. But yeah, before every show and at least a couple of times.
Next question.
Dave Chalmers, in Glasgow, Scotland. Can the panel recommend an integrated USB headset with volume control for out-of-vision audio contributions that has a good enough mic for broadcast use?
Good enough. The tricky part there is good enough for broadcast use. I don't know. When we start talking about headset mics, integrated headset mics with USB, the problem you really get into is the compression and the lack of dynamic range. So usually they're designed to be very intelligible, but it can be sometimes painful, and it's not usually something that creates a situation where you feel like you could listen to it in a broadcast. I don't know if anyone knows of any integrated USB. I have gone through a lot trying to find what you're talking about. Now, Plantronics makes a couple that are not too bad. I think that Twit uses one of them. They're not pretty by any means, but they aren't horrible. But I haven't seen any that I would consider really broadcast quality. But Plantronics probably, and I don't have the model number anymore in my head. I used to of what might be possible there. But that's where I'd probably look. Next question.
Sergey Blondin in Montreal, Canada is up next. Excuse me. Does anyone on the panel use OSX Montery, and any issues with popular software, OBS, Loopback, Blackmagic, Zoom, and so forth?
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm actually using Big Sur, and I'm going to answer your question by not answering the question. And I firmly believe that when it comes to this stuff, figure it out, move forward, find new tools. When people go, well, my thing doesn't work with the thing, it's like, find something else. The future's happening. It's going to happen. You have to go. You can't stay on OS 7 forever.
I'm just starting to upgrade to Big Sur, so I'm on the other side of that. I'm just starting like a couple computers. I'm like, oh, this might actually work. So it's slowly but surely, yeah, kind of doing that. So I tend to stay way behind, and I still have one Mojave computer that is managing you know, a couple pieces of software that I need every once in a while. But even then, it gets to a point where it's just untenable, and then you move on. But I always have a computer that has the newest version of things, so I can test things on it and use those tools. Then I have another computer that, you know, is usually the one I work on, and that's usually one whole version behind, you know, and just let everything settle.
Yeah, we had to deal with this with our database software that scans all of our archive drives. We have like 300 some drives scanned into this database, and with one of the last couple of versions, it was like, it's not going to work. It's like, you know what, got to find something else. I'm not going to jeopardize the whole business by running everything on an OS that's 3 years old. And we found another thing, and actually it works better. It's more efficient. It's faster. Guess what?
I will admit that I make some decisions about software developers who can't move forward, you know, like that they're writing spaghetti code, you know, like, you know, like it's not, you know, if they can't move forward, that means that they've bet on old frameworks. They're not updating their frameworks. They're not moving forward. They're not, you know, so I will admit that if I see a company that can't move forward within, you know, not immediately, but within a month or two after something was released, I start thinking, I probably ought to be thinking about other software than what they're using. Go ahead, Mitchell. Can't hear you, Mitchell. Sync is great, though.
Sorry about that. One of my editing computers still uses Mojave because it's an old Power Mac, and as long as it still works and there's no issues with upgrading software like an Adobe Cloud, I don't have any issues. But I did get screwed on the NVIDIA freeze out from Apple, so that kind of put me off to doing upgrades without testing first and checking things.
Nigel?
Yeah, I have Monterey running on an iMac, an i9. Everything is working fine that I have, except the Rogue Amiga stuff that isn't yet supported, but I don't run OBS on it.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I have a counterpoint to what Chris was saying before about things moving on. There's a camera behind me that only records RAW to a specific version of Yosemite. So my Mac Mini is stuck on that. A place where I worked had 486-based computers, this is less than a decade ago, that ran the air conditioning systems and the UPS systems because they were all serial connected devices that were put in when the building was put in. And then look at the computer parts that NASA has had to go and find to keep the ISS running and to keep the shuttle running. There are special cases where software and
we now
hardware
have
to stay in
SpaceX,
place.
new rockets, new buildings.
It's going to happen.
If your AC doesn't work, move.
The funniest one here is that funniest one, but at ILM we had this big arm, you know, it's a motion control arm, and it was called the Cooper system, you know, and it was built, I don't know, in the 80s, and to load the motions, you know, for the arm to do it. So if you want to do a shot around like the you know, like the Pirates of the Caribbean, the ship is a 1/12 scale. So you make the arm go 1/12 the distance around it, and that's how you know, get a shot of the Black Pearl. Anyway, so this system though is so old, to Stuart's thing, it still needed floppies. And the thing is that you had to load it into floppy. So you would do it in Maya. Like you would literally do the animation in Maya. You do the tracking in whatever you were doing in tracking in, and then you'd put it into Maya, and then you drop it all into the thing. But you'd have to convert it to a text file, and then somebody had to have a floppy drive, like a USB to floppy, and we'd write it to this floppy. But we only had like 2 of the floppy disks, so it was like all these dark fingerprints all over the floppy, because you're in a camera space. It's not like you're in a nice place. You're like working in model shop, you know, and you're doing all this. It was always like, ew. You know, it's like this gross little thing but these are the two discs that we had to use for the Cooper system. I think it's still running somewhere in like Sonoma. I think someone bought it, and the Cooper system is still around, and they're probably still using those floppy disks. Anyway, go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, on the issue of Big Sur, my biggest thing has been that unfortunately for the M1 architecture, Dante has not made a virtual sound card available, and it's been a bummer because I've had to wait. I was going to move my entire production to the Mac Mini, but that one piece of software has stopped me. Now, to Chris's point, I'm perfectly fine doing what I'm doing it with, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, Dante hasn't been able to do it, although I hear they're hiring more developers currently.
Not that we're bitter. Next question.
Comes from Brian Becker in Charlottesville, Virginia. And Brian asks, there we go, now it clicked. Has anyone had success connecting a webcam to a MacBook Pro with an active USB-C camera cable that is 10 foot or longer? Bad idea altogether, or could that be okay as an overhead B camera where the lip sync isn't of a consideration?
Go ahead, Rupert.
Just as a heads up, I think everybody should check for Wi-Fi real quick. I think there's a lot of skepticism and hesitancy about extending USB. You know, it's kind of shoehorning something into not really what it's designed to do. I think it would depend on what kind of webcam you're using and what kind of res it's trying to push down the cable. I have put like a C920 on the end of, I think, like a 30-foot active cable. That was obviously USB-A, and that did work. It did work, but just watch out for that. USB 2, I mean, like the C920 is USB 2, for example. That can be, I have extended USB 2 devices quite successfully over active repeaters that go over Cat5. So you could get some longer distances over that. Just watch out. It's not the sync that's going to fail though. It's going to be the device itself. It's going to just suddenly disconnect itself. So you'll, you know, if you get a little bit of interference on that cable or just anything kind of that blips it, that device is going to drop and then maybe come back. So it's reliability you really want to watch for.
Next question.
Next one comes from David Brady in New York. And he says, in regards to renaming of a Zoom name, is the moment of change trackable from a forensic standpoint? And I was trying to go through and parse this, make sure I was reading it correctly. I often rename myself to I during events, but in attendee reports, this does not reflect, it only shows my name. I saw that I, and I thought it was the pipe symbol, which is a typesetting symbol. I was really confused here.
I don't know for sure. I think that, yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I think what he's saying is, and this happens in the webinar, because we had that problem because people were registering with their name and putting their location in, and then you guys were talking about how you were using that information in the back end and you didn't want to have the location as well. So the answer is that there is a recorded point of where you get that your name is there at the event, whether you change the name or not on screen.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and when I was thinking of this in typesetting terms and trying to figure out whether he meant I or some other thing, it got me thinking about Unicode, which is the process of using all these symbols. And it is a very flexible thing, but it changes a lot. I don't know if they could track something that might exist in one character set, but might not exist in what Zoom understands. So you're in this deep level of type codes. And some type codes just might be completely not searchable because they're just not common enough across all systems.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think what David was referring to there is perhaps a pipeline. And I think his use case is, you know, if you're trying to get a clean aperture and you're wanting to rename your name to something that just uses as little space as possible, that might be his use case there. And we were discussing this a little bit before as to what actually comes up on the report, the meeting report in the back end after the fact. And I know that if you're using a registered meeting with registration, I think what comes up in the report is the name of the attendee as they registered.
I believe
perhaps.
So. Yeah. I think it's. I don't think that any of the changes are reflected otherwise. Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, given the burn-in issues with OLED TVs as monitors, would a mini LED TV or similar technology like LG's range, and he has a link there, be better as a large computer monitor?
I don't know that answer for sure, but we stay with LCDs most of the time just to make sure, because they're a lot more robust, just robust and for what we need them for monitors. The only time we use OLED or LED technologies is if we really need to get the full color gamut that we're trying to get to. So it's usually a video out, to get something there. We just don't want to have anything. I think that anything that you have with an LED is going to have some level of burn-in, and it burns in quickly, so it doesn't take very many days for you to do it. We had to do with an OLED. We had someone forget they had a test pattern and they left it there overnight. Just in case you're wondering, that's the end of that monitor. so it was only a $6,000 monitor, whatever. Anyway, next question.
Moving on, Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas says we have seen how a Korg nanoKONTRL can be used as an external control surface for audio mixing on a MixPre. Could the same or something similar be done for external audio control on the ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, so I was waiting to see if someone else would want to take this one, and I'm curious to see if someone else has a less hacky approach to it. But the way I would go about it is there's a program called Osculator. If you guys haven't heard of it, it's a little cheap program that can take MIDI devices and turn it into OSC, and it does a really good bidirectional communication with that. So that's what a lot of my operators are using, nanoKONTRLs with the X-Air series of mixers. So we're using that to turn that nanoKONTRL MIDI into OSC, so we can do it to there. With ATEM, you have OSC or ATEM OSC, obviously, as a way to get OSC into it. So you now have two little middleware apps in the process, which I don't love, but it does function. The hardest part is making sure that you get the feedback going to try to make sure that you're not going to have a jump in the fader when you move this non-motorized fader to its new position.
For some reason, I thought that there were some supported, other than Fairlight, that there were some supported surfaces for the ATEM, but I guess not. For some reason, I thought that was there somewhere. That was directly supported. No, next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland is up next, and he says, has anyone used Ecamm Live on the MacMini M1? If so, is it reliable?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, use it every week. Do my podcast, my work podcast, using Ecamm Live on my M1. I have 16 meg M1. Never had a problem. Have both the live, the current version and the beta version, and both seem pretty stable at this point.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Victor mentioned his Universal Audio Apollo Solo was going through a Dante network. How are you bridging the Apollo onto the network?
Go ahead, Victor.
I'm just coming out of the Apollo, and then I'm using one of the Dante Avio out cards, and that gets it right into the network. And then I can put that Apollo actually into the X32. I can do anything I want with this microphone coming from the Apollo to the X32. Works very well.
It's good to have you back, Victor. I haven't seen you for a little while. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. If you were mixing your audio on a separate mixer while your video goes through the ATEM, would you need to time align the audio to the video if you're streaming software like in mimoLive?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you separate your audio from your video, you will need to correct it. So you'll need to figure out what your offset is. One thing that once I finish it a little bit further, I want to make it a little nicer. I'm going to post a video into Discord that you guys can download. That is a sync test video file that I've been playing with. And what this does is it gives you a series of dots, and they'll play out. And I showed it in After Hours, I think, a couple times. But what it does is you can actually just, if someone on the other side says you're out of sync, just have them take their camera and point it at the TV, and they hit record, send you back the file, and I can tell you exactly how far off you are. So you can measure it. The reason that it's needed is so you can measure it on the far end, all the way through the pipeline, all the way out. You can, at any device, you can just take your phone and point it at your iPad and to your TV and to your whatever. I just did it in the theater yesterday. So you can, if you want to measure the pipeline, you can measure the whole thing on the end, and it doesn't require any hardware. It's just a little video you can just play through your system. In fact, you can play it on an iPad with a microphone, with a camera, and have someone look at it on their, Apple TV or whatever, and they record it on their end, and it'll tell you what your offset is through the entire system. So that's so I'll post that probably next week. I just want to make it look nicer. It looks very basic right now. I'm not happy with it. So anyway, we'll post that soon. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. LG and other vendors offer commercial grade displays, but they don't have as varied a selection as on the consumer side. Given the security issues with smart TV features, would a commercial display be better as a monitor?
I don't know if the commercial displays, they tend to be a little bit more reliable. They tend to have more features to them so that you can do fine tuning of the settings, and there's not so much oftentimes little extras that they make that they do for consumers. But we have used so many consumer monitors where we would normally, where folks would have in the past used those kinds of commercial grade ones. I think that they're very close. It just depends if you're going to run them 24/7 for months or years. the commercial ones are the way to go. Like they're not, the home one, your home ones are not built for that many hours and that much on uptime. Go ahead, Bill.
I agree with all of that. I would say, though, that if you make sure that you don't turn on the Bluetooth or connect your TV in any way to the internet, it becomes a little more safe. So it's just a process of not allowing it any access to anywhere that it could get malware put into it. I've never attached 2 of my TVs that have smart features to any sort of source. And other than, I think in one of them, I updated the firmware because there was a known problem. But other than that, I had to attach it for 10 minutes, take it back off, and they're just like monitors in that respect. Not as robust as Alex mentioned, but they work.
By the way, for our producers, we're running a little low on questions for the first hour. So if you've got any burning questions that you weren't sure you were going to put in, this is a good time to do it. Next question.
Doug McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. Up next, has anyone used an add-on for autofocus on the Blackmagic PC4k? And then he's got a link there for one form of that.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I use Bluetooth Plus every day. It runs on iOS and also run on my M1 Mac. I find that reliable. There's also a Blackmagic version of that, but the Bluetooth Plus version appears better. I've never used the one he mentions.
So this is like a little, what he's talking about is this tiny little controller that would kind of give you a, outboard control. They've got some pretty cool things in there. They have it connected to potentially to a game controller, which is kind of an interesting way to approach that. But it looks interesting. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, CES 2022 is still scheduled to be in person. If CES cancels like NAB did, could the office hours community step into the breach?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
First of all, the CES has announced at the beginning of the year that they will be doing a virtual and an in-person thing. And that, of course, that's always going to be the plan, to try and do the in-person first, because that's what the conference is all about. As for bringing it into office hours, there's going to be certain aspects that could probably go into office hours. I don't want to see us talking about smartwatches and things like that unless it had some sort of production value. So, and of course, CES being that big, there's going to be a lot to talk about in the audio visual space, and go from there. But there'll definitely be a virtual aspect to things as well.
Go ahead, Chris.
Mark your calendar. I said it today. It's not going to happen. They'll shut it down. They just have to. It won't. It won't. Hope is. What do you say, Alex?
Hope is not a strategy.
You're the one who says it all the time. That's right.
I didn't start. I will to credit properly. I can't say who said it to me, but it was not me. I didn't create that saying. I don't know where it came from, but hope is not a strategy was something that was said to somebody. It wasn't even said to me. It was said to somebody else in a meeting. Like they were like, well, we hope that we're going to be able to have access to this at this time. And a very high level executive looked at them and said, hope is not a strategy. And it was, and they never said that again. There was no more hope in that company. Go ahead, Bill.
So part of the reason that these conferences grew so big is that they have a structure around them, a contractual legal structure that is deep. It's been going on for years. And I'm kind of interested because with this new world of taking everything out of this physical space and moving it into virtual things, I'm wondering how the legal industry and these big conferences where there are literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on the line are going to address things. Because if you're announcing something and you've got all of your plans for your huge company on announcing a new device and you have a Zoom blackout or something just at the moment you're about to do that, the liability costs are real and massive. Now, this will eventually get sorted out, but those contracts that used to exist for the physical space events do not yet. They haven't had time to propagate out into virtual space and provide some level of assurance for the companies investing all this money and putting it out to the world that their message is actually going to get out. There's also the tracking, how many people are actually watching this. And this will all be sorted out. I firmly believe this new world will happen, but it's going to take a while. And there's a lot of details a lot of I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed before it moves virtually fully.
The companies have externalized their ability to reach their customers, and that is a liability for them. Fundamentally, they're sitting there not building a relationship with their customers. What we've gotten ourselves into across many, many platforms is the transactional, basically a transactional relationship between the vendor, between the company and people. We buy a bunch of ads, we buy this, and there's percentages, and there's, okay, if we do this, we're going to have this many percentage, and this is what it'll equal in sales, and we're going to go to this, and we'll collect this many names, and then we'll email them all, and then we'll get a certain number of sales, and we'll do all this stuff. But that's a transactional relationship with their customers. Right now, they have the ability. All these companies have the ability to build a real relationship with their customers. Customers that are passionate about their product, passionate about what they're doing, by constantly engaging them, constantly educating them on how to use the product better, constantly supporting them with their problems. And for the companies that do that well, a lot of them are doing it very quietly. There's companies that are doing it really quietly, and just ongoingly. You look at the stuff that Blackmagic does. Blackmagic is constantly building training, constantly. And they're constantly supporting people in, groups in their industry and other things like that. They're constantly, doing all this work to move things forward. And what ends up happening? They end up with a lot of people buying their products, without that much of a transactional. How many emails do you get from Blackmagic? Maybe one a year, maybe 2 or 3 a year. They almost never use that email list. And because they're constantly building those relationships, and so that's the future of for brands, in doing that. I mean, you look at another, I'm going to embarrass him for just a second, but Guy Cochran comes in and he hangs out with us, and we buy a lot of stuff from Guy because we know him. Like, he's built a relationship with us, but without a bunch of advertising, without about talking about it. Like, he doesn't talk about it. It doesn't say like DVE store all over his thing. I didn't even know he owned DVE store for the first 6 weeks. So it was just someone who showed up, and I didn't piece it together. But that's the future. Is building those relations. You watch how Guy gets involved with stuff. He supports other people doing stuff. And I know that I'm kind of calling him out, but it's, and because of that, a person like me, when I can buy something from Guy, I'm going to call him first, because I have a relationship with him. I have a relationship with a person that I know is going to mean something, as opposed to just buying something online from somebody, And so, in the same way, if I'm not buying from Guy, I'm buying it from Sweetwater. I buy it from Sweetwater because I know that Robert Johnson is, Robert Williams is my guy. And I can call him, and he remembers me, and he knows all the stuff I bought. And I know he's sitting there looking at Salesforce, but he's, but he does remember a lot of those things, and will ask things. And so that's the companies that do that really well. That's the company of the future. The companies that are doing all this transactional stuff of just doing other things are going to continually, pay a price. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think you said it when you said that these people have given up their ability to be in contact with their customers to somebody else. They're relying on NAB as their way of contacting their customers. All of these services, and I was joking about this, I think, just yesterday, all of these services that we rely on all the time, they will go away. Like I think I joked about, I lost all my contacts in my CompuServe email address. I mean, these things will go away. Google will go away. Facebook will go away. It's not going to be right away. I think they'll probably get through the year. They got a little runway, but they will go away.
Right. Yeah. Or they'll make it harder, or you're at their mercy, is the other part.
Or they'll choke you out with your relationship with your customers to the point where it's like, it's not worth it anymore. You have to build your own systems. You have to build your own relationships. And I totally agree. Guy is the future. If I'm walking down the street and there's 2 hot dog stands, and one of them is Nathan's Hot Dogs, and one of them is Alex Lindsay's Hot Dogs, and Alex is standing there, I'm going to go, hey, Alex, how you doing? It's a great day, great day. I'm not going to turn while I'm talking to my friend Alex and buy a Nathan's Hot Dog from the other guy. I'm going to buy the hot dog from my friend.
Right. Yeah.
Every single time, even if it's more.
Yeah.
Even if it's more.
And again, a lot of these technologies, we have to remember that the conferences were built at a time when you didn't have all these technologies. But literally, if companies got up there every week doing Q&A about their products, every week on Zoom, just got up there and did what we're doing here once a week, they would build this incredibly intense, not all of their customers would come, but they'd build this incredibly intense group of people that will buy stuff, when they put it out, because they, they're connected to that whole process. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, what you call the transactional method, came from the funnel, which was a desperate attempt by the marketing team to feel like it had some science to it. And some of my CMO colleagues have got absolutely seduced by MQLs, SQLs, and have numbers without meaning. And I think one of the things we have to do in our world is work out how to replace those numbers with numbers that are meaningful to them, that they can go back to the CEO, they can sit opposite the head of sales and say something intelligible about the experience that they're getting. Because if we don't do that, they're going to get crushed by the desire for these numbers.
Yeah, Victor.
Even huge companies like Apple are doing this. My wife recently bought an M1 MacBook, and within 3 days of delivery, she had an email to set up a one-on-one session with an Apple genius to answer any questions that she had about her new piece of equipment. I don't remember that happening before, but to her, it was super important. To me, it was like, good, I don't have to do this. So that was great.
Well, and you know, Apple has all these free classes in the apps in the Apple stores. When my kids visit LA, they go to the app. Their grandmother just takes. I don't know if she just doesn't know what to do with them or not, but she just takes them to the Apple store and just sets them down, and they take one class after another, and they learn all these things about how to use their phone. Now, are they going to be using Apple products for a long time? Probably. Are they building am I building a close relationship with Apple because of that? Probably. I mean, I think that like Apple, because they do all that work, I mean, so much of what Apple does in the Apple App Store or the Apple stores is customer support. You're coming in to fix something, you're coming in for training, you're coming in for help, you're coming in. That's why it makes so much money per square foot is because it's not just a store. It is the place that you contact, you're interacting with Apple, you know, and the thing is then, and Apple has built that up to a point where literally I still think they should flex on before these announcements and say, we're releasing a product and this is how much it costs. We're not going to tell you anything about it, and see how many people order. like we don't, you know, and I still think that would be the ultimate flex, you know, just like because they would probably sell more iPhones than Samsung sells all year, you know, like you know, of a certain brand of one model or whatever in the first week without even telling you what it was. Like we don't even need the keynote. We can sell, you know, 20 million phones without even telling you what it is. But that's from building a relationship, you know, with it. Yeah, Nigel, you're gonna say something else? No. Okay. Next question.
Moving on, Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas is up next. When on site at large events, what additional permitting could be required depending on the circumstances, like working at height or using powered access equipment?
There's so many. So it just depends, you know, permitting is part of everything that you do. I mean, you have to get permitting to park, you know, at a large event. You have to get a permit to, you know, oftentimes there'll be, you know, if you're doing wireless, you might need permits for the wireless, but you definitely need to coordinate it with the wireless systems. And then you're definitely bringing in only specific vendors that have the permitting to, you know, do, you know, any of the large installs. Yeah. So it's quite a process. Next question.
I was just looking at the queue. We suddenly went from.
I know the producers. Anytime we tell the producers like, "Hey, we could use some more questions," and they just step right up and off we go. So we'll do the best we can to get through all of these, or we'll just push them back if we don't get to them all. Anyway, go ahead. Next question.
Stuart in Melbourne, Australia, is up next, and he says, "I shot a set of short 10-second ProRes samples at 444 422 HQ, 422 422 LT, and proxy." All 1080 by P30 to send to Mr. Preto for playback testing. Would anybody else like the link and its ENG color settings?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would love to see that. Would you shoot it of, Stuart? Oh, there it is.
Scion, of course, because it records ProRes internally. And I could just cycle through. And so I know they're created like as genuine, proper Apple compliant ProRes files. And it's just a shot of some flowers in the garden, but it'll find out if things play back properly.
What I would love.
I do also have some longer ones if somebody wants interlaced as well, or they need about a minute of footage.
I would, if you're game, I'd love to see, you know, Ocean is good. Oceans are good.
Yeah, we're in lockdown. But there is a park that I'm thinking about going up to with the camera where there is ripples across a pond.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants the link, I will find a place in Discord, but is there a place to put this sort of link in Discord?
I don't know if there is. We should put a section, Chad, I'm sure can put it like, you know, sample test files or something,
Chad,
or sample
hit me
files.
up with a message and I will put the link there and away you go.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. Has anyone any experience with Streamlabs Charity. One of the nonprofits I work with wants better donation tools for their live streams. Any other recommendations?
I do think that both Facebook and YouTube have their own donation systems that are pretty effective, and I don't think they even take any percentage. I think they do it as an outreach program, and so I do believe that they'll manage all your credit card processing and everything for you. So I think that I would also do some research on that. You do have to be it looks like they're already a charity, but if you're already a charity, you just need all the 501c3. There's a lot of checking that goes on to make sure that works. But I do believe they have that. Those are the two that I would think of off the top of my head. Next question.
James in Dublin says, a follow-up to my Ecamm question, which do the panel feel is more full-featured, Ecamm or mimoLive?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, sorry about the hand earlier. I was just willing to buy whatever it is Apple was announcing without telling me what it was. So I don't have mimoLive, but I just looked up mimoLive, and it has an ATEM interface that you can use the ATEM to switch. I'd love to know if anyone's made that and if that really works.
It absolutely works. so it absolutely ties in. It's go ahead. You can mix the two, so you can take advantage. You can have the ATEM feeding into it. You can also send key fill out of memo to the ATEM. So there's a lot of different ways to use that. Go ahead, Victor.
So I can't speak to Mimo, but as far as Ecamm, what I will speak to is that they have an incredibly intelligent online community in Facebook of people that are willing to share knowledge the way we share knowledge, and also their support team is very dedicated to the customers. So although I am not currently using Ecamm, I recommend it because for the niche that it does it very well, and that support community makes it worth it if you're getting into the space.
Yeah, my experience is I've used both of them, and mimoLive is at a different level of feature sets and so on and so forth. You have to decide whether you need that level. But if they have a lot of pieces in there, and I if I'm doing an all software event, which I don't do very often anymore, but I do them, I use Mimo because it gives me all the tools that I need to tie that together. And that took me a long time, just to put in perspective. I think Oliver tried to get me to use it for like 6 years. So it was a long thing. But now that I'm in it, like, oh, that's what I'll use for that. So next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, the Drobo network attached storage drives use proprietary striping and redundancy protocols that allow usage of dissimilar drive capacities. Would this be a reasonable archive solution? And how do these units compare to typical Synology offerings?
Go ahead, Chris.
I was kind of surprised Drobo's still around. I guess they are. I would not use for archive, depending on what you mean by archive. Is it just something you're putting away for a long period of time? You might go back to it. I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't bother putting something like that on a NAS. I just put we archive everything on OEM drives, on USB 3 sleds. We scan it into a database so it's accessible. I can find it later. I named the drives by number. I'm currently looking at drive 272, which I had to pull something off the other day. That's what I would do for archive. If you still need to work it, put it on a RAID. But Drobo, really,
Victor?
Yeah, for a NAS type solution, I would definitely go with Synology these days. That being said, I've had a Drobo that does my time machine for 10 years, and it's never not worked. So you never know.
I've had 5 or 6 Drobos, and I still have a couple that I use for a variety of things. Nothing exists unless it exists in 2 physical places and once in the cloud. so if anything that's important to you needs to live, exists in a couple of different places, if it matters. If it, there's a lot of things I don't do that with because it's just way too much data. But things that I need, that I know I need to get to, I've got it in 2 different places, and then I put it in the cloud to back it up. But as a general storage sitting next to my computer, my Drobos worked pretty well. I've had Drobos that I didn't turn on. I realized I hadn't turned them on for 8 years, and I turned them on. And they were like, "Hello," and I have to admit, I'm very carefully pulling stuff off of them. I'm like, I don't know how long you will live now that you're on, but I hadn't. Literally, I realized I just needed to plug them in. Not that much old stuff that wasn't somewhere else, but it was funny to see them. Next question.
Rotem Kish in Mazikrat Batia, Israel says, I'm moving from PC to Mac. What software do I need for both daily use and live productions?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Aspirin.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Rotem, you'll be sadly missed.
Sorry, what would you?
Or Tim, you'll be sadly missed.
I thought we don't talk about religion here.
Yeah, go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I'm going to say either carbon copy cloner or super duper. It's just one of those things. And then for me, it's 1Password. So immediately 1Password, carbon copy cloner or super duper. Talk to me if you want to know more. I have tons of recommendations.
The best thing to do is also we need to know what you're trying to do. Like there's so many places to go there that once you move into the Mac world, you have to think through that. Next question.
Keel Holiday in Dallas, Texas is up next, and he says, would running Zoom on a separate computer be helpful instead of on your primary machine?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Absolutely, especially especially if you've got a machine that's just hitting the bare minimums and you're using it for other things. Most of us have multiple tabs open in whatever browser we use. We probably have stuff in the taskbar. We probably even have Microsoft Teams sitting in the taskbar, which I always find. So it's nice to have another machine to do that. And Guy clued me in on this, and I've been testing actually doing Zoom off of the Fire TV Cube, the 4K version. So that's a good option as well. And then of course the whole Facebook portals, things like that are good options.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rupert.
Having it on two machines is definitely useful. That gives you a second instance to have maybe a second instance of the gallery, or just two different functions. Also, if you are hosting the meeting, it can be invaluable because if something happens to your machine or you need to restart or do something else, you can pass host to your other machine, do what you need to on your first machine, and then swap back if you need to.
I will say I've become a huge fan of Mac Minis, so I have lots of them. I think we're crested 20 of them because you just have lots of little computers instead of one big computer, and they are so fast. I was rendering. I had a problem with my Mac Mini. I was like, why is it not playing this back? And then I realized, oh, it's 8K 120. Like it's not, but it, like literally was almost playing it back. So and then that was a little 8 meg Mac Mini. So that's good to have lots of little computers. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego here says, I host a Zoom meeting and record it into the Zoom cloud. The Zoom recording shows only the speaker view. How do you record the grid view in the Zoom cloud?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So on the back end in Zoom, in your web settings, there's a whole bunch of settings there for your cloud recording options. You can select what you want to record and they will come out as separate files, and you've got other kind of options there. So just go into the settings in Zoom and then the recording tab at the top there, and you can set those preferences.
Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland up next. So everyone seems to love vMix. For a Mac user, would an AWS instance be a real option for day-to-day use? Would it be expensive to run?
Go ahead, Guy.
Well, it's pretty cheap. It's about $125 for a G4DN 2X or 4X is recommended for vMix, and $125. I mean, it's not that bad, but you do need to make sure that you request those instances. And then the other thing is, how are you going to get the feed up there? So you need a contribution source to mix your video. So maybe Zoom is a contribution. A lot of people are using SRT. So how are you going to get that SRT up there? You can use OBS for free and just plug in some code and you get it up there in about 2 seconds latency. So it just depends on the gig. Like if you're doing high school sports or something like that, an iPhone with Lyrics is also an option. So yeah, I mean, it's a good way of not owning a PC, and yeah, it doesn't cost much to get started. Just got to sign up.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota is up next. I'm looking at getting a new laptop. With the shortage of graphics cards, options are few. Are there any known issues with the AMD RX series, the RX 5800 in particular?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Can't speak to that one particular, but I'd just like to point out for just general knowledge, there's a whole range of Lenovo's that have Quadro GPUs built in, and they will do your NVENC encoder in hardware. So if you're doing streaming and what have you, and you want to take load off the CPU and GPU, that's a real easy budget-oriented way to get around a few problems.
And we'll go, we were running out of questions. We'll go 5 minutes over, and we pushed a bunch of them back. So if you're watching and you wonder what happened to my question, it's in your notes section. We pushed it back to you from Makana because we just ran out of time, but we'll answer a couple more. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Is anyone experienced with NDI5 improving?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So NDI5 has been doing a great job for me. The biggest problem, though, is that splash screen. So if you lose a connection with your with whatever camera you're going to, you'll get an NDI splash screen. And in production, that might not be the neatest of things.
Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California says, I'm using an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO as a primary switcher and an ATEM Television Studio HD as a backup. Is there a way to link the primary key press with the backup so that the backup is switched automatically?
Not directly. So this gets into ATEM OSC, oscillator, like you can build it so that you have to basically build some sort of interface that's talking to both of them at the same time. So there's no way to internally set up two switchers to listen to one keystroke because it's tied to an IP. But you can, we have done it in a variety of different ways of pulling that back one, and then you're talking to a system that's talking to both of them. But that's the only way we've seen it done so far. Next question.
Nathan GS in Singapore is audio focused, requiring 4 stream presenters to be mic'd up on lavs. And the panel's thoughts on using 2 sets of Deity Connect systems, for example, 4 transmitter body packs and 2 RX Duo receiver systems in an indoor setting.
It just depends on distance. So distance and other things going on, in those areas. So what can you use? I mean, a lot of things will work. A Rode, Go will work in many, many places perfectly. But if you start adding a lot of people, you start adding a lot of wireless, you start adding a lot of metal, you start adding a lot of distance, all those things, make a difference in what you're doing there. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was thinking about this for the last, year and a half, year and 8 months, whatever it's been now. We've been really changing the way we think as we do start to go back out into, the real world, or what's Carmi call it, the before times.
Before times.
Remember your broadcast audio engineers. These guys do this all the time. They know how to do it. They know how to deal with all of the environmental problems.
Right.
They have all the little adapters. Look at how many times our friend Mickey has reached out a frame. He goes, "Oh, you need this adapter."
Yeah, exactly.
And that's because he has it available to him. So hire those people. They're going to solve more problems than you even know could pop up.
But if you are trying to kind of cobble something together, I mean, the main thing is the thing you have to be very careful of is that something will work when nobody's in the room, and then it doesn't work when they're in the room because they're adding a bunch of wireless. They're adding they're big water sacks that slow down your wireless. So there, there's all these things that that are problematic for your transmission. So you just have to remember that that it's not going to be the same. And this is, you always have to know that. And so you always want to overbuild. One of the things that you can do if you're going to use these transmitters, you'll always think about, I'm just going to throw the wireless receiver in the back with my gear. You're better off putting it on the stage. So if you're using a less expensive wireless system, put it in the podium, find a place to hide it, get it 10 feet away from the person that's speaking, not 150 feet away. And a lot of things work really well when you don't have to run them very far. Next question.
Comes from Walt Palmer in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And he said, we just learned the President of the United States will be visiting his Rehoboth Beach home this weekend with all the Secret Service black Suburbans with tons of antennas. Should I be concerned with using my wireless mics?
Let's try to go quickly. This is the last one before the next one. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think the Secret Service would be more concerned. They would be interfering with that. I've done plenty of events in Rehoboth when Joe is there. And I've even mentioned or pointed out to some of his handlers if there'd be any issues, and there were none. So that's where you're not going to get a problem from Joe.
Go ahead, Bill.
I just wonder if there's presidential spectrum, if there's something they've completely blocked off that's outside of the normal stuff, because even scanning for Secret Service chat would be a no-no. So they probably have something in there that's crazy, I'm guessing.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Just make sure you're not using wireless mics that are outside the legal spectrum anymore. Old microphones or anything like that. Check all your frequencies and try and get towards the middle of the frequency range rather than the edges.
There's a bubble that lives around POTUS, FLOTUS, and VPOTUS that is pretty intense, but you have to be pretty close to it. So them being in town isn't going to be a problem. You being within 300 feet is. So just know that it's about 300 feet. Then it's really hard to get things working. They had a problem in Oakland when Obama came through that all the police scanners stopped working. They just put a whole new set of police scanners in, and they happened to get into the range that doesn't work. And so suddenly they're trying to coordinate all the whole motorcade to go through Oakland, and they couldn't. They were like on cell phones calling each other because the radio stopped working. So there absolutely is, but you have to be pretty close to do that. I don't know what the exact reasons are for it for Secret Service, but I can tell you that in other parts of the world, it's done so that you can't activate an IED. So that's around within a certain distance of things. But we've absolutely had this issue. Like we've had this issue. We had an event with Flotus in South Africa, and we told them that it was going to be a problem, and that their wireless weren't going to work. And she ended up on a wired SM58 that I insisted on because it will only not work when they're there. It's a difference. It's not the same protocol when you're rehearsing and there's lots of Secret Service around. It's when they're in the room becomes the problem. So anyway, so yeah, so you could, if your event's in the same hotel, you should worry about it. If you're somewhere in the same city, it won't matter.
Do they just have big jammers that they carry around with them?
Yes.
I mean,
Secret Service
I'm not asking you to tell me something you're not supposed to tell me, but
Secret Service has said they absolutely don't have any secret. To be official, I've asked them, and they've said they absolutely don't have any jammers. And I've absolutely talked to other people who said that they have them. Like, I don't know if Secret Service has them, but I have them. So I was talking to somebody who said, yeah, if my Humvee parks outside your house and I'm going in for a meeting, I push a button and no one's making a phone call. So it's absolutely, but I don't know if they're used in this country. So that's
plausible deniability.
Yeah. Anyway, but we've always been told that it doesn't exist. Our experience would tell us differently. Next question.
That's it for the regular ones. We're now past to Zoomtopia questions are coming
rolling in. All right, let's change subjects to Zoomtopia. So Zoomtopia happened this week. It's a once a year extravaganza of Zoomness. And so a bunch of us have watched it. A bunch of us have opinions. So we'll dig into. We'll start with answering. Well, before we start, just raise your hand. If you want to say something, but what were your impressions of Zoom before we jump into the questions for the panel? Does the panel have any out of the box? Go ahead, John.
Too diverse, too many different topics, too many simultaneous events. That's my 30,000 foot view.
Yeah. Any other? Now I will admit one thing that I was. Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Only that I missed it, so push me back to panelist and enjoy the rest of the show, guys.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I thought that it was well done, and they're pushing the envelope, eating their own dog food by doing the expo, and I drug my little dude across to the Zoom booth and kind of jumped in a meeting with like 12 employees. I thought that was cool to get that feel of going to a real trade show and going to a booth with 12 employees in there, and got to ask questions I wanted to ask, and there were some heavy hitters in there that got some stuff done. I was super impressed.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, just keeping in mind for this discussion too, I think I've said this before, we're kind of looking at this at two angles, maybe like Zoom events as a new platform and how that performed, and then Zoomtopia and the content and how that was put together. So it was just interesting from both sides of that fence.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I was surprised at is that everything wasn't more available more quickly. Like I went up to try to before the show to kind of review a bunch of stuff, and I was surprised that there weren't. I work on a lot of conferences, and usually the amount of time between when the conference happens and when it's available online is measured in hours. Like sometimes minutes. So especially if they're a post production, and you want to have that. It's most valuable the week after the event. So you try to, there's this massive push. I mean, there's companies that I work with, they have a team of 30 or 40 people editing that are just sitting in a room, like literally 30, 40 machines, with editors all sitting there getting the sessions and doing any edits. So like for instance, some companies will have people in the audience taking notes of, we got to take that out. We got to put, we got to take that out, cut over that. There was a mistake here. There was and then that edit list comes in real time, and the editors turn it over, and then they composite it and they put it back up. And that's in many different companies. There's some version of that. And so I was kind of surprised today when I went up and there was so many that weren't available. I was kind of like, that's an odd. It's just something that once you do 20 or 30 of them, they'll get into the habit of turning those over because people really care about them right around that moment. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, one thing I appreciated is the technical help I was able to go into some of the exhibits and talk to some people that really seemed like they knew what they were doing. I really pushed them on some of the questions, and they knew, except for one guy. I guess he was filling in for someone, and then the other guy came in, and then he knew what he was talking about. But yeah, I appreciated the talented and up-to-date tech.
From an execution perspective, I did appreciate the fact that, at least the parts that I saw as I was reviewing it. Again, I thought that I'd be able to watch a lot more of it before this episode, but it wasn't there. But the keying for some of the larger ones was better. You know, like there was obviously some care put into the keying, exposure and black levels and and overall compositing was still pretty basic. So from a compositor's perspective, but it looked like kind of a plus version of what it does. The smaller sessions that had just people on their webcams that were in front of a virtual background were still horrendous. Like it's just a horrendous thing to do to people, to make them watch the little edges going all over the place is just not, it's not okay for a big conference. I get that people should do that in a meeting. I get it. You don't want to show your background. You don't want to do whatever. But when we dress a certain way when we go to a barbecue, and we dress a different way when we go on stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people. And in the same way, I think that we should, I think that Zoom needs to, and I admit that I'll probably get in a lot of trouble for saying this, but it's literally holding back virtual events. Is just the cognitive load created by virtual backgrounds is just brutal, because it's just really hard to watch. Anyway, let's jump into the questions.
Sure. The first one comes from Eric Price in Kansas City, and he said, went to the wrong place. That's all right. I'll jump it back here. And I can't.
Go ahead, just read it from the answer. Yeah, you got to hit it right before you start asking the question.
Was weird.
I hit it. The reason it's not weird, I hit it because you were behind. so you have to hit it right before you ask the question. You can't do it while you ask the question. Right before you start talking, you have to hit it because it's setting metadata for us. So anyway.
Okay. So the question was, why would Zoom choose to allow a senior executive to show up in a Zoomtopia session with his virtual background, routinely lopping his ears off? Why not use quality green screening cameras and lighting like with the CEO?
I think that's the mystery that we all have. So we don't know. We don't know why that's the case, but it's something that it's why I wait till the sessions are over and I'll listen to them. I can't watch them. I can't look at it. It makes me so upset. So I don't know why that happens. Next question.
Laura Thompson in Texas, going back to the discussion from Tuesday about Zoomtopia and the virtual backgrounds. I think during the discussion, we were using the term green screen and virtual background interchangeably, but possibly inaccurately. Any thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I meant to hit my button for the previous question, but I too am curious about this. Were there at one point I heard everybody talking about virtual sets. Are we actually doing virtual sets with like tracking backgrounds, or was it just
no? It looked like it was just a still that had. It was a still with mismatched vanishing points. so anyway, so here's the problem: is when you put a still behind someone with mismatched vanishing points, again, people don't notice it, but they feel it. It feels weird. And we have to get past the idea of that people don't complain, so it must be okay. Or that people they don't complain, so it must be okay. They don't notice it, so it must be okay. But they don't understand that it makes people feel differently. It is a feeling of offness that the brain is constantly processing this offness and error correcting it in their head. So their subconscious is constantly working on this, and it creates cognitive load, and it basically contributes to people what we call Zoom fatigue, is mostly because of bad audio, bad video, bad backgrounds. It's a really, like, we sit here for hours doing this without that fatigue because we have good audio and we have real backgrounds. Go ahead, Laura.
Yes, and this was actually also in the context of the accessibility conversation we had on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And I had brought it up to you that green screening with a proper hardware key, there is not the issue that there is with the virtual background, and that we kind of need to get because as industry professionals, we know the difference, but those who are watching on YouTube and blah, blah, blah may not.
Yeah. And it's hard, so green screen, when we're talking about that, is usually processed in hardware or software. It's removing a green and putting something else back there. And when it's done well, it can work really well. What we're talking about with the virtual backgrounds with everyone else, and we'll move on after this. I want to get past this, but when we talk about this, we're talking about what's called some version of a difference key, or possibly some AI, where it's basically looking at what's not moving, and identifying a face and identifying a couple things and making decisions about that. But it's not working well yet. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, up next. Zoomtopia was a Zoom Events conference. When will Zoom Events conference be available, and what are the key added features with conference in Zoom Events?
Go ahead, Sam.
So that is why I'm here today, to answer a couple of those questions. Just the slightest bit of backstory, because I'm not typically a panelist on here. I lead the event specialist team for Zoom. So my team, I am the one who did the Zoom Events build out for Zoomtopia.
And by the way, your virtual background is quite nice.
I know. I'm trying not to put up a hand or something to really make it show off.
So we give you a hard time. Yeah, when you don't move too much, it works okay.
But it's because of vanishing points. It's exactly what you said. This background is good because I took this background from here. It is my background. Right. I took it with this camera, with this lighting. And actually, Alex, I got that trick from you. The first time time I met you on a call, you showed me how you had done exactly that.
Yeah.
And you're 100% on the money. Honestly, at this point, I took down a lot of my lighting for a video shoot I was doing, which is why I'm stuck with this background. But I'm going to start by saying that on a personal level, I'm with you guys. I love real backgrounds. I love the depth of field. I love the naturalness of it. I'm with you. Getting back to the question. So Zoom Events Conference does not have a release date currently. What it does have, Zoomtopia was actually technically not the first event that happened on it. Zoom Summer Academy technically happened on conference as well for some really specific reasons, but we didn't really use any of the new features. Zoomtopia used all the new features. It's in active development, lots of new features really quickly rolling out. There will be more features by the time it does launch. But the ultimate answer to the question of when it's available is, while it's not launching for the public to use on their own right now, what it is launching for right now is we're going to start letting people build conferences with Zoom Events if they use my team. They use the event services team to assist with the build out and support. There's a lot of things going on with it right now. There's lots of new features. Setting up a conference is a complicated thing. There's a lot going on. And so we have a team set up to help do that build out and support, and make sure that if there are any gotchas, if there are any tricks or specific ways you need to do things, that's there. So the answer is both not today and today.
And it makes a ton of sense to dog food your own product, and especially as you're in development, to just have the team like seeing how people are using it and then making those error corrections. It makes sense.
And I guess just for a little tidbit, if any of you checked out the earnings call for, I think it was the Q1 earnings call, was the day that Eric came on and he said, we're doing Zoomtopia on Zoom Events.
Right.
That was that moment was the moment that all of us found out as well. That the product team found out, that my support team found out, that the marketing team found out. We all learned in that moment what was happening. And that was 5 months ago, I think. Right. So it's been a race to the finish.
Yeah. Well done. Well done. Next question.
Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas, here in the panel often. For the purposes of this discussion, can we distinguish quickly between Zoomtopia and the fact that it was hosted on the new Zoom Events platform?
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, so I don't know how much that's an answer versus just funneling the questions as we get them now. That Zoomtopia as a conference, I'm not going to have a whole ton of stuff I'm going to talk about, the choices of content and things like that. I'm not going to have an opinion to say here, but the features and what that opens up for other people to use. Yeah, let's dig in.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas. Did anyone complete the Zoomtopia post-event survey? The same email from Zoom also offers a behind-the-scenes look at how Zoomtopia was produced on September 21st. Any thoughts about that?
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, so that's my session. So I'm going to be leading that webinar on the 21st. What time is it at? It's going to be on our main events page. Zoom.us/events is where you'll be able to register for it. It's at 1 o'clock Central on the 21st. But I'll have a small presentation showing some of the behind the scenes of the features of conferences. I've gotten the okay from them to go ahead and screen share the back end as you build conferences, because it's significantly different than what you guys can see for building single and summit events now.
Right.
So I'm able to share that with everyone there. And then at the end, I'm all about Q&A. So that session is going to be half Q&A if you want to show up and dig in with me.
That's great. You know, we don't believe in Q&A at all.
No, it's not the way of the future.
No, absolutely. Next question.
Stan Chan in Roseville, California is up next with, when will NDI support come to a normal Zoom client to enable feature parity with Microsoft Teams?
I don't know if we know.
It's currently not roadmapped for a date.
There you go. There you go. Next question.
Our friend Talank Lopez Waterman in Astoria, New York, is back with what is the thinking behind Zoomtopia Awards? They seem to have lifted up a virtual background app. What are the metrics here?
Yeah, how they make that decision. so because there's there's this little company called Liminal that is the core of everything that we do, or everything that we're working on, and is the best example of what you could do with Zoom, and it was a virtual background app. So I don't know exactly what the metrics are. I think virtual backgrounds evidently are very important. Next question.
Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. Were there any announcements at Zoomtopia regarding improvements or updates to Zoom Room NDI?
I think that there's a lot of people that would. Interested. Go ahead.
I don't think there was anything announced, but they are working on, as soon as they released it, they started working on the next iteration. So they're working on some new features for it.
Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Did anyone see the behind the scenes photos on social media of Eric Yon and his virtual set? Thoughts on the setup?
I didn't see it. Rupert, can you describe what that was?
I can show a picture. It's from social media. So it was this.
That looks good. And I don't think I saw that. How did it look as far as the key goes? I have to admit, I jumped on, I looked at a couple of them, and I had trouble playing. They had little like highlights up there. Did the key look good?
So, I mean, it was head to toe. I think that, the feet always can look a bit challenging, but it was okay.
Yeah. So I wasn't able to get to it. I mean, I just had trouble. Interestingly enough, I had trouble finding the post-production of Zoomtopia afterwards to get prep for this. It was one of those things, like a lot of stuff wasn't available. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah. So right now, all the recordings are available within the Zoom events lobby. But then they're coming out to Zoomtopia.com at the end of the week. And that's where the actual ongoing on-demand content's going to live. It's a reskin of the player from last year, but that'll have all the sessions on it.
Got it. That's where I'm looking, and that's where I can't find it.
Within the event lobby, you can still see, you can still go to the event lobby if you were registered before the ticket sales ended at the day of the show. You can see the recordings within there, browse the sessions, all of that.
Right. Okay, that makes more sense. I did register. I just have to go back and look. I just thought that, in every other place that almost all the other conferences that I work on, you go to their site afterwards and it's all there, or it's all on YouTube, or it's all on, it's all posted somewhere, again, within hours typically, or sometimes minutes. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas is up next with, for how long will Zoomtopia recorded sessions be available?
Go ahead, Sam.
So we're going to shut down the Zoom events lobby after 30 days. But again, that's not where the recordings are really going to live. They're going to live on Zoomtopia.com, where the 2020 sessions are still there. So
a while,
as
long as you'll need them.
A year to in perpetuity.
Yeah. Next question.
Comes to us from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Status.zoom.us reported an outage with the events.zoom.us shortly after Zoomtopia concluded. Was this related to the load you faced with Zoomtopia?
Absolutely not. It was not.
There you go. Next question.
Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. For Sam, regarding Zoom Room NDI, are we any closer to getting access to the web controller? An even better solution would be a BitFocus companion module to manage Zoom Rooms from a Stream Deck, since so many are already using that interface.
Getting closer with the web controller, yes. Getting closer with BitFocus Companion, that's going to be hard, because your route to get there is the CLI. It's the SSH API that Zoom Rooms has for remote control. And candidly, I don't know how fast those NDI features would be coming to that. And it's also it's complicated to work with. It's not what you're used to dealing with BitFocus.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says Zoom is introducing Oculus virtual reality connectivity. Given the risk of physical side effects from VR use for long periods, could you see this feature being popular?
I've streamed conferences for Oculus in Oculus. I don't find them that compelling, I will admit. I think that fundamentally the challenge that conferences have is that the most of the content is inherently boring. like it's really good to something to listen to while you're working, not something to take up all of. So what happens with VR right now is you monotask. None of us monotask when we go to conferences. It took me a little while to figure this out. So I probably streamed, 20 or 30 conferences in some way, shape, or form in 360. It was something that we were doing for a long time. And so we were putting them in, sometimes multi-camera 360 and up on stage and all kinds of other stuff. And I couldn't figure out why. I was just like, I could only watch it for a couple minutes. And then I was like, I got to take this off. And, part of it, I thought, it's to what Douglas was talking about, that it wasn't, that it was hurting my eyes or it was doing something else or whatever. And I will admit, until we got to 4K stereo, I was kind of like, this is just kind of a bad version of this. Once we got to 4K stereo, you really felt like you were sitting on the stage, and you were able to watch it. It was streaming that live is like $500,000 of equipment. so the just in case you're wondering, with 5 cameras and anyway. So the issue is that what I realized after some period of time was that that's not how I deal with. It's not even how I was when I was in classes, when I was in school, and it's definitely not how I deal with conferences. Is that I don't sit and watch. I sit and I work on email and I text and I go on Twitter and I do a bunch of other things while I'm doing it. And inherently, the content isn't very good. It's very slow. The content density is very low, and so by itself, the speakiness of it. And I think that we see Apple kind of moving to the next level with that process, where their keynote is a video production and that you can actually watch it. I found myself even having trouble doing the second ear experience with everybody in office hours and after hours, because there was so much content coming at me from Apple that it was not at that speed. We used to have tons of time to talk when they were on stage because it was slow and boring as well. So as we move towards these things, if you're going to have people sit and watch something, I think that you're going to have to move more and more towards video production and away from just simple presentations, because you just can't talk fast enough to make it interesting. And so I think that putting VR, I've grown to have the opinion that VR for classes and VR for conferences may or may not work if they're not interactive, like highly interactive, like there's some reason for me to watch it. But if it's just people putting up slides, it's not going to be worth it. Next question.
Jason Panks of Nashville is up next with I Miss Zoomtopia. What were the panel's favorite upcoming Zoom features?
Does anyone have any that jumped out at them? Were there any big announcements for new features? I think a lot of them sounded like they were pushed out a little bit into the next couple quarters. But I didn't know that I had to go back into the thing for Zoomtopia. So I was hoping to see a bunch of stuff that I didn't see yet. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas wonders, was there a master control room for Zoomtopia?
Sam?
Yeah, so there were a couple different ones. So there was a mix of pre-recorded and live content. I think everyone can tell that. More of it was live than you would kind of expect, I think, especially on the production side of things. Every time you see Eric is live, all the fireside chats were live. That key was being done live. As much as Alex, as a compositing expert, is probably never going to love our key.
I could, and I would help you for free so I could watch it. So anyway, go ahead.
But so there were a couple different control rooms. So the live sessions on that main stage and even the pre-recorded sessions that had that same look were mostly done at the San Jose Convention Center, where we've had the show for the past several years, both in person and now in virtual. All of the playback was done out of a studio that me and my team spun up here in Austin. All of APAC, both live and pre-recorded, was done out of a studio in Singapore. And then there was also studios spun up in New York and London for a couple sessions that didn't want to travel people to California to do their pre-records for the larger keynotes that had the I'm not going to call it a virtual set, the backgrounds with a full screen or a full body shot key. That's what I'm going to call it. So as far as master control room, it mostly on the day of it mostly came out of our studio here in Austin.
That's great. Yeah. And so you had a couple studios, and that was just a place that people could come and just come and do their thing, so they didn't have to do it as much at home.
Yeah. Well, and so my team typically is doing stuff from home, but because we aren't able to get redundant internet in most of the homes, we end up doing a hot backup out of a different home, which is very hard. Like it takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of team. It takes a lot of equipment. It takes just a lot of resources. So when they tell us that we need to have 13 playback systems at the same time, that's where we go ahead and rent out a studio that has good bonded redundant internet. And now my backup situation is only backing up for an issue of a computer crash or a rig crash instead of having to have a 1-to-1 backup ratio.
Can you tell us what you were playing out with?
Yeah, honestly, we were playing out with OBS.
Yeah.
We figured out just lightweight because the videos were fully baked, OBS virtual camera into Zoom, so that we didn't have to have multiple computers, capture cards, and an actual rig for this one.
Right. That makes sense. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, how did you bring Chris Stapleton in as a musical entertainment for the event? Was he in a conventional music or broadcast studio, or was he connected from home? Did his regular front of house mixer mix the performance, and did you turn on original sound?
Go ahead, Sam.
There were many sessions that were live. His was not one of them. The rest of the session was. Chris was pre-recorded. I believe he recorded it from home on his own setup. And then, yes, original sound was on for everything where we have a mixer anywhere in the chain.
Next question.
James Brooks is up next with, will there be a time? Oh, no, wait a second. Do you think Zoom will incorporate any of the features that are now available in Zoom ISO into the native Zoom app?
So we're working, if you think about what you're doing with ISO from that standpoint, a lot of the simpler low-hanging fruit tasks you're doing, like I just want to throw a lower third on and stuff, are going to be features that are going to start rolling out into native anyway. That's not going to replace the complex shows that you want to do. We're always going to have a place where you need operators and you need someone at a master control room adding that quality and that power. From there, the NDI approach at the moment is Zoom Rooms, but I'm not on the product team, so I can't tell you too much about what I expect them to come down with the future, other than we're always adding stuff.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Will there be a time when Zoom events like Zoomtopia will be accessible via a web browser as opposed to only in the Zoom client?
There's a lot around how Zoom events works where that's new to people, how it ties back to a Zoom account, how it ties back to the app, specific app versions. But at the end of the day, we want as many people on these events as we possibly can. So we're definitely, while I don't know of a specific roadmap time to get there, I would be amazed if that wasn't heavily in the plan. We need people from all devices, from all locations to be able to join these things.
I'm completely against that. like I just think you should make everybody use apps so that we just have it all work rather than, I mean, the 80% of our problems with a large conference is the web. The web app, the web instance of Zoom is 80% of our workload, is because it's just all these people who can't get it working, and they're having some problem and they don't see the multi-pins and they don't see all the other things, and it's just, and they would use the app if the web client didn't exist. They just don't want to do it.
That is the short-term answer, is that at the end of the day, that can't happen without feature parity. We can't have situations where, oh, well, it looks like this here in the app, but it looks like that to the web browser. It has to match because you're curating an experience. You have to know that the experience is going to be the same everywhere. So that will have to be a prereq for anything that does that. As an aside, I'll also tell you that we had set up phone support for our speakers to call on the day of the show if they had issues. And 90% of the issues that my team troubleshot was they didn't log into the app. That was it. That's what everyone's issue always boils down to. You can troubleshoot them with them forever, but at the end of the day, they never logged into the app because they've never had to before. And it's different now. It's something that that we at Zoom were potentially a little bit blind to because we do live and breathe in this app, and at some point have to step back and remember that the rest of the world doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we have, for when we do events, we prep all the speakers a week before. We set all that stuff up. We have them come in an hour before, even after they've been prepped and set up. And nowadays the kits we send out have computers with them because we literally just do Apple Remote Desktop in, just take over. And so they don't have to think about how this actually works because it just got rid of so much trouble. And we open up our conferences way early, so there's a place for people to chat anywhere from an hour to half an hour minimum, mostly so that we can deal with everybody who can't get in because they don't understand how the system's working. Right. Yeah. But it's when you see people like, that open up the gate at the top of the hour, not Zoom, but I'm saying you always know someone's new to this when they open it up at 10 o'clock for a 10 o'clock meeting, and then they spend the next 20 minutes trying to get everybody kind of sorted out. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says Zoomtopia featured concurrent meetings. My understanding is that this is not currently a Zoom event supported feature. Which meeting nodes in the latter to be released Zoom events feature? What meeting modes feature concurrent meetings?
Yeah, so on Zoom events, you have three types of events: a single session, a summit, and the thing that none of you have at the moment is the conference. Conference is what Zoomtopia was. Within any of those, they can be a meeting or a webinar. And for those that have multiple sessions, any of the sessions can be a meeting or a webinar. Conference allows you to have meetings and webinar sessions that have overlapping times. And so conferences is that feature that we don't currently have a locked release date for. But obviously we used it for Zoomtopia. It is kind of out there. That's what's available with event services supporting.
And I will be always contrarian when we talk about conferences and just remind people that the reason we did that was because we had a limited number of, we had to bring all these people in at one time and they had to be part of this thing. And so we built a 3-day thing or a 4-day thing. And it was based on the limit that we were limited by time and space, and so the limit of time and space created conferences. We no longer have that limit, but we keep on living inside that limit of we want to do something over 3 or 4 days, as to opposed to instead of having concurrent meetings. I just know that as a conference goer, I hated the fact that things were going on at the same time because I want to watch this one and create interactivity, and that's a real bummer. And creativity is the secret sauce to every meeting. It's all we do here is we just interact with people, and it drives everything. Instead of watching someone just pontificate, we want to have a conversation with them, and the problem is if you create interactivity, then you create an enormous amount of pressure because people now don't get to be part of that conversation and this one at the same time. Whereas if you just take a conference and you just stretch it out to a weekly event, you don't need concurrent meetings. So I just want to keep on saying that to people. Just like, I know that it sounds crazy, but I think that within 5 years, we're going to go, oh, remember that time when we used to do things all at the same time? It was all done in 4 days. Like, why were we doing that? So it's, and I, if you have enough information, you can do it every day, 7 days a week, 5 days sometimes. What were you going to say, Sam?
Well, the other thing I was going to point out because that's the biggest link to conferences, and that's what everyone's asking us for right now. And your point is incredibly valid on that. Like your point of like, we need. I know that
you're serving. Totally. I know you're serving the client. Like I totally know. That
I was just going to mention that while that's the biggest feature difference, the other difference is conferences is what allows you to take a single ticketed event and spread it out on up to 5 days, whereas a summit can only be on a single day. So it does allow you to have up to 5 days for your conference. It also opens up the sponsor capability, the ability to have different ticket types for different people on different sessions. Whereas on a summit, like if I make someone a panelist for a summit, they're a panelist on all of my sessions. On conferences, I can make you a speaker for this session.
Yeah.
And now you're an attendee for the other. So there's a lot more. There's a whole ton of reasons where people are going to end up using conferences,
right?
Even if they don't have any overlap. And actually, that's what you saw on Zoom Academy, the actual first event that happened on it. Right. There was no overlap at all. We still needed conferences for a couple other features.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, Sam, the 5 days, somebody in marketing picked that. Somebody in sales picked that as a limit. Change it to 30. Change it to 30. Tell them that this might be the thing where people go, we could do this over 30 days. Because we all agree that the concurrent nature is ridiculous. The last conferences that I went to in the before days, the before times, I would never go to a session because everything I was doing was happening in the hallways with people.
100%.
Everything. I never went to sessions. They'd have to be giving away, free beer and gold bars for me and I don't even drink, to go into the session because everything I was doing was in the hallways.
I was so excited to
take that artificial limit of 5 days and push those people. Say, why can't we spread this out over a couple of weeks? Let's do 3 weeks. Let's do 4 weeks.
Yeah, I was really excited to hear you guys talking about the expo and walking around in there and playing with it because I was a huge proponent for it because of exactly literally the same word you just used, Chris. I said, I went when Zoomtopia was in person. I went to Zoomtopia to go have the conversation in the hallway. That is 100% why I went. You don't go for the sessions. I can go watch a video of the session later. I'm going to see that person.
All right, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's room for both in this sense only. One of the things about those old conferences was that that topic, let's say it's NAM for the music people, was you do your regular stuff all year long, but for that week, you are more focused. And just like Office Hours has the focus on sessions, which helps somebody coming find content filtered out of the main thing. If the aspect of a particular calendar set helps people focus on that industry or that subject for a particular time, if they are so busy they can't be there all the time. I do think there's reason for both. And I absolutely am a supporter of Alex's overall idea to spread it out for most things. But I think the focus thing also has a place, not the old place. Not this is the only way we do it.
But I just don't have, I don't know where I would do that anymore. I just don't have any, I've gone from I don't have time to go to the garage anymore. I don't have time to, I had to drive yesterday and it was just all this lost time.
No more spelunking, Alex?
I went to San Francisco. I went to the city and it was 40 minutes away and then 40 minutes back. And that's the longest I've driven in a very long time. And it was, and so the thing is that I guess, especially with our experience of Office Hours, I just feel like we dig into things so much deeper. And I feel like this contrived, thing. Now, there is times when I'd love to spend a week learning how to do something or a couple hours on a Saturday. But I kind of feel like I think I need more time as a person who goes to it. I don't want to have to remember all of those things from 1 week at one time. My brain gets mushy. I like to have an intent. That's why I like having Saturday sessions and workshops and things like that are going on all the time, so I can focus on it for a couple hours and then move on. And I'm not saying that there's not any room for it, but I'm saying that the future is going to be there's a future coming, and it's going to not be conferences. It doesn't mean that they'll go away. There'll be a place for them. There's still theater, there's still radio, there's still things, but the big game is going to be ongoing content, ongoing interaction, ongoing processes. Next question.
Next question, Douglas Carmichael's up next. Would there be any way for me to access the recorded sessions without being registered for the event?
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, by Monday, it's all going to be on Zoomtopia.com.
Okay. Next question. Now we've learned that, by the way, that the Zoomtopia discussion should happen a week after Zoomtopia, not the day after Zoomtopia, so that we all have a chance to see it. All right, next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Some comments in the Zoomtopia chat pointed out the HD video quality in Zoomtopia. Did the event set realistic expectations for the everyday user who doesn't ordinarily have access in HD in Zoom?
So everyone on this call should know that you can contact support and request 720. They'll give you 720 with any license. With a business license, they'll give you 1080 for webinars. If you have an event coming up and you are using a pro license for it, contact support and tell them, I have an event on this day. I need broadcast quality. I need 1080 for this event. They'll give it to you for that event, and then they'll turn it back off afterwards and go back to 720. So everyone on this call should absolutely know that. I don't want to see any more big webinars at 360. I don't want to see it. Don't do it.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was wondering, Sam, do you think that, I've been using Zoom for a long time, way before COVID, way before. Do you think that and we all realized that you guys had to like throttle down because your user base jumped, tenfold or whatever overnight. Do you think that the beginning of COVID has made people, has allowed Zoom to go, they seem to be pretty happy with 360 or, 640 by 360, or is the intention that there will be a day where it's like, yep, everything's 1080, everybody, none of this silly email-ness stuff. What's your thought on that? Actually, you probably can't say. I apologize for asking the question. Let's move on.
I can answer a little bit, and that's that you have proponents in the company like me who are always fighting for HD. The conversation's a lot bigger than me, but you do have proponents for events specifically targeting this. Another thing I will say is if you look at the messages that came up onto the Group HD page on the support site, when it first happened, the message was all HD is kind of being shut off. And at some point it changed to every account can go in and request 720. And the point I'll make there is that 720 versus 360 is a massive change on Zoom. 1080 versus 720 with the way our algorithms work, in my opinion, is not a world of difference. It's great if you can get it, but as long as you're at 720, I'm a pretty happy camper.
And I can see the point. I mean, for me, I personally think that webinars should always be 720. Like if you're paying for a webinar, it should just be, it's going to be on to that, the thing. I think general meetings from a cost perspective, from a consumer reliability perspective, I think there's some arguments that 640 by 360 makes sense unless you want it to be higher. But I do think that the 640 by 360 impacts these whole things that people talk about, Zoom fatigue. Looking at everyone at low res, I think affects people, and I think that, and I work a lot where we talk about how people feel, not what they notice, not what they complain about, not what they, all these things we talk, well, no one's complaining or no one notices or whatever. But that the most damaging things are what we're finding is what people feel. Like they feel tired. They feel this, they feel that. They don't know why. It's lower brain. It's even worse than them noticing. Like it's how they feel it actually has more of an impact on what they think about that process. And that's why I get against the virtual backgrounds and everything else, because they feel very artificial. And like yours doesn't feel very artificial because you matched it, and the key isn't perfect, but it's not bad, when you don't move your arms. But you fit into it. The lighting works and everything else. It doesn't create that cognitive dissonance, in the background because you took the care to do that piece, but that's not what people do. And when they put a flat slate behind them with some logo on it or whatever that misses it, it's creating cognitive load for the viewer because their brain is actively saying that's okay. That's I'm gonna make that okay, and they're saying it all the time. Like that's okay, and that makes it tiring to watch. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is coming up next, and he asked what features are available in Zoom events, webinars, and meetings that would not be available in one-off webinars and meetings.
Sam.
So really, Zoom events is about the out of meeting experience. Once you get to the session, you're in a meeting or a webinar, and there are a couple limitations to that. There are a couple features that don't show up in a Zoom events meeting or webinar session, but for the most part, consider that at parity. And then Zoom events is really about the outside experience. It's about how did I register for it? How did I find it? How did I ticket it? And then when we're talking summits and conferences, it's the lobby and the expo and all the craziness there. But you're not going to find a whole lot of like, within a Zoom event, I can create a webinar that can do X within the session. That's not a thing. What you may hear, though, if you listened back, one of the sessions talked about Backstage, one of the new webinar features coming out. That is going to be a feature that is part of the Zoom events license, but it is a webinar feature. It is being built by our webinar team. It is a feature of webinars. So you'll be able to do a webinar that is not part of Zoom Events, that is just a regular webinar and uses that feature. You just need the Zoom Events license to be able to get access to it.
Yeah, makes sense. Go ahead, Rupert.
I also understand that Zoom events can obviously require registration and then can require authentication so that the user be logged in, but it can also require that the user be logged in with the actual email that they registered with, so you can tie those two together. Can Sam just talk about that maybe real quick?
Yeah, so that last bit is not part of it. So you can require registration, you can require authentication to make you sign in. I can also require you to make you sign in with an email at certain domains. But what I can't with regular webinars, I can't require you to log in, register with an email, and sign in with that email. That is what Zoom Events does. That, from a ticketing standpoint, is why Zoom Events is important. Zoom Events is the first time we've taken registration and tied it to a Zoom account. What you can do in webinars, and what we did for Zoomtopia last year even, was we had just launched external authentication. So there's a method with registration to say, I'm going to set up an authentication profile. Instead of caring about Zoom login at all, I'm not going to require you to log in. I'm just going to, when you come click the link, I'm going to do this SAML call to your outside system and say, are they logged in there? Am I good to let this person in? And that response. So now you can take your outboard system. So for Zoomtopia last year, we built a whole front end website that had registration and had sign in. That was the registration it authenticated against to make sure that you couldn't grab this link from a webinar and give it to someone else and let them in. On a technical level, there was no registration last year at the Zoom webinars. And that's also not completely true. There was at the last minute for another reason, but from a security standpoint, there wasn't. Josh.
Oh, nope, I think, you have more, Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and is that the reason why I believe some people were having trouble with concurrent meetings, getting in and out of the Zoom events? Is that because the Zoom events required them to be in one specific meeting? Some of the accounts have enterprise accounts that enable them to run concurrent meetings, multiple instances, I should say, of the meeting.
Are you talking about specific to Zoomtopia?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, we noticed some difference in behavior.
So I guess where it comes down there is if you're talking about actual, not concurrent meetings, not licenses, but you're talking about the ability to join 2 Zoom meetings with my app on one computer, which is technically not concurrent meetings. It's another flag in the back end. Zoom Events really wants to be your one. And so like once you have your Zoom Events one up, you can probably start you can start and join into another meeting on that device somewhere else. But if you already like if I'm in this meeting and I went to go launch a Zoom Events meeting session, it wouldn't like it. It wants to be my one. Yeah, there's some tricks to that.
Next question.
Stan Chan of Roseville, California is up next, and he asks, thoughts on Salesforce possibly competing in the Zoom space?
Go ahead, Chris. Did you raise your hand, Chris?
Yeah, I did. I think good luck. I mean, I know Salesforce has a lot of money in a big old building that looks like a nose hair clipper, but Zoom is so far out in advance, ahead, so far, that there would have to be an absolute bloodletting of talent from Zoom.
Well, I don't know if Salesforce has to compete with Zoom. So I think that this is something that we have to look at of the different verticals that are going on in those areas. What Salesforce has to do is inside their walled garden, they make it easier by internalizing a video conferencing system, people who use Salesforce can easily do these things, and you can manage all of your registration through your Salesforce connections, and you can do all the, you can tie as far as lead generation, as far as all those things that they can just have it all be part of it. Does it compete with Zoom on a international level? I don't think so. But in the same way, it's like when Cisco bought Slido. It's a good example. Like Slido's basically, they don't care about it being the thing that everyone's using. They care about people who use WebEx being able to use it. And they're building up their ecosystem. I think the Teams I think Teams is actually focused more on Zoom. But still, it's mostly a service for people who use Microsoft, Microsoft products, because I almost never see Teams. I see Teams, I see Zoom, some Blue Jeans, and then a Teams meeting, and it's a WebEx meeting here and there, unfortunately, because it drives me crazy.
There's some certain software companies up north that use a lot of Teams.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work for them. So maybe, but think about all the times that we hear people say, where did you send me the message? Did you send it on Facebook or Discord or text message? It's like, do we need to have another?
But that's the point, though. That's why you do it in Salesforce, is so that you can. The reason you do that is when you're in the ecosystem, when you're in the Salesforce ecosystem, what they want to be able to do is make it easy for you to do all the things you want to do without having to go out of the castle. So if there's a cool feature that something has that's pulling you out of the castle all the time, they're like, oh, let's make sure that you have that inside the castle. And so let's add those things in the same way that like Apple, builds a lot of things, and theirs doesn't have every feature that they have doesn't have to beat everybody else's feature. It just has to be good enough that we're like, it's pretty good, and it all works inside of here, and I don't have to have a single sign on, and I have, all those things are really important to folks who use those, especially when you're talking about, a giant corporation that has 200,000 employees or 100,000 employees, and it's all being managed in some way through Salesforce. It's easier for them to have all that SSO and everything else all tied together. Not that I spent 10 years streaming Salesforce events. so when you ask about Salesforce, I have a lot of background of just watching them slowly just acquire things, and they don't all succeed. I mean, like Chatter. You probably don't remember Chatter. That was like the thing that was supposed to be Slack. so anyway, then didn't work out. Anyway, next question.
Rupert McCrae up next. Dallas, Texas comes in with, were kits sent to the remote speakers?
There were no kits this year.
And so they either came to the studio or they did it with whatever they had.
Yeah. The concept is that we've been Zooming everyone has been Zooming at home for 18 months now. So they've settled into it. There were no speaker kits sent.
That's a concept. The worst part is that we have so many speakers who just say, I've been doing this for 18 months. I know how to do this. And they don't know how to do it, and then the viewer pays for it because they don't know how to do it. Next question.
Comes back from Rodam Kish and Mezek here at Betia, Israel. At the event, there were a number of sponsors selling microphones. Why were a large portion of the panelists had the audio of the computer and not those microphones?
Because they've been doing it for 18 months, right? Right, Sam?
I do think the answer to this question is the same. Yeah.
And they know how to do it.
They know how to do it.
They know how to,
but they don't.
And they don't care about anybody listening to them. Anyway, next question.
Next question comes from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. And he said, what were the challenges of the expo element of the event?
So, I mean, Expo, you saw when you went in there, Expo said beta next to it. Obviously, this was the very first time we had run it for anything at this scale. One of the interesting things that we did, like I said earlier, like I was a huge proponent for making sure the Expo happened. Product team wanted it in, obviously, but as we got down to it, there was a question of like whether it could happen or not. The Expo is built around the idea that your sponsors would be manning those booths. It's a place to give the sponsors booths. And instead, I had flipped that into, hey, every time we've done Zoomtopia, we've always had Zoom rooms set up where at that point I was on the Zoom Room AV design team. You would come and it would be your chance to come talk to me and ask me about your Zoom room setup. And I would talk DSPs with you and that sort of thing. So that was really big for me, was getting me and my team in to have that Zoom events and webinars booth where we can come and answer questions, because we need access to you. You need access to us. So we can answer these questions about product and about what is Zoom events, how does it work? That's what we want the most. So because it came late in the game and we really didn't have it's a beta feature flying in at the last minute, we didn't have enough lead time to get the sponsors on board with it. So instead, we didn't give access to the sponsors. We created fake sponsors for Zoom rooms and Zoom meetings and all the Zoom products, the 6 booths we had, and found a way in the back end to hide them from the sponsor page so we could just expose them here and then staff it out with our people to let you in. For anyone who saw it, you saw that there was you come into the booth and there's one meeting. There's also in the future the ability to have a resource table there with PDFs that you can download, so you can have all your brochures, your pamphlets. Just here you go, document library. And then you can have up to 4 different meetings. The way we tended to run it was one meeting with breakouts. So you'd have a gatekeeper who would, you get in, you find your question, let me put you down as a subject matter expert into that breakout that can tell you about that, to try to handle the multiple conversations that happen within a show floor booth.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, up again with, will there be an upgrade path for people who have bought into webinar under commitment, but who now want to upgrade to events?
So if you're under commitment with your rep, go ahead and talk to them. They can definitely get you swapped out from webinar up to events. They'd love to upsell you.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, comes back again with, might Zoomtopia, or specifically Zoom events, morph into a hybrid solution in the future?
As soon as we're able to have people on site for Zoomtopia, we're going to love to turn that into a hybrid conference of some kind. And for Zoom events, everyone and their mother is asking for hybrid right now, because the industry hasn't followed up with Alex Lindsay's future of the wide, not conference, why would I drive anywhere world that we're heading towards. The industry is archaic and wants to stay around and wants to survive and thrive in what they know. Some of them have come along with us and are in this meeting today. Some of them haven't figured it out yet and are still holding hope that it's going to go back. So hybrid's going to be a thing. Hybrid's going to be a huge thing for the future, in good ways and in bad. So it would be crazy of us not to think of that in the future of Zoom events.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned it in another show. I turned down speaking at an event recently. I just made the decision I'm not speaking anymore in person. Like, I won't do it. Like from now on, if you want me to speak, give me a screen in your room. And I'm happy to show up from my office, but I'm not coming. I'm not interested anymore. And it was an interesting thing to turn down the conference. Like, just say, no, I'm not going to do that. And so if you do it virtually, or if you put a screen in the room, I'm willing to show up for your thing. And I think that, here's the interesting thing, is I think that the future of hybrid, when I say digital first events, I think that the answer is not that you don't have a place for people to come and congregate and meet in the hallways. The difference is you don't put the speakers on the stage. That's what makes it a hybrid event. A digital first event is that all the speakers are coming in on a screen like this, well lit, good microphones, designed so that the online audience has a great experience. And we just put them on a screen. They're on a big LED wall in front of everybody, and they can look out and interact with that audience. They can, interact with the online audience. They can do all those things. And we've been doing that for years, of putting people on screens. And so we know that it's totally doable, especially what's really doable is taking people off the stage. Because once you do that, you get rid of the labs. You just have SM58s. The whole sound thing becomes easy. You can now just have people stand up with an SM58 and ask questions to the people that are up there. So you can do all the things that you would have in a hybrid event. You just got to get the people that are speaking out of that. We've even done ones where they're in the same building, like they're on another floor. So when you have dinner, they're still there. But what we did is we pushed them into it, because that puts the online audience, which is now becoming much, much larger than the in-room audience. I mean, it's just going to keep scaling. The online audience is going to be, it's going to be a 10x, and then it's going to be 100x, and it's going to be 1,000x of the people in the room. And so they get a great experience, and the people in the room also get to talk to each other and have dinner and do all the other things. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, this article about platform enhancements, and then he has a link there, mentions expanded translation and a transcription. Could this be useful for expanding office hours to those with disabilities and non-English speakers?
What were the enhancements there? Sam, have you been digging much into that?
I don't think this is vision, not product feature releases. But it all had to do with our acquisition of kites.
Got it. Very good. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has our last question up on the board here, and he asks, how did you bring Zoom-sourced audio and video into the production infrastructure? Did you have dedicated Zoom rooms, NDI connected for each person?
Yeah, so we're a little old school, but conceptually, yes. So the San Jose and the Singapore studios were the two that were doing that live on the day of. And either place where they're doing it, there's what we would do is have a meeting for all of our remote talent to be coming in. And then inside of that meeting, you meet at the top level, you find an event producer who's a smiling face and tech checks you, puts you down into a breakout. And everyone has their own individual breakout, one-to-one, I have Viola Davis here coming on this Zoom meeting on this laptop. We're sending her program feed that way. She's coming this way. The reason I said we're old school is that we're coming out HDMI, not NDI in our workflow there. But yes, everyone who you saw remotely, Jimmy as the hosts, our fireside chat guests are all coming in on their own isolated Zoom call.
That's it. So, by the way, we talked about how vendors needed to interact more with folks. Sam, I just want to really thank you for coming. Just this is exactly what I was talking about. It just makes a huge difference to have someone from the company, talking to us and educating us, and so that we understand what's happening, what the thought processes are. Super, super value. And Sam just I didn't reach out to Sam. Sam just said, "Hey, if you want me to come on, I can come on." I was like, "Oh yeah, we do." It's very, as soon as I saw the email. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time out with us.
Absolutely, love to do it. Anytime you guys want me out, hit me up.
Okay, that's a dangerous thing to tell us. Yeah. So anyway, but I think that if we'll schedule around Sam, because I think that even once a month having Sam on and just doing Zoom Q&A, if you're up for it, Sam, we might try to. I'm putting you on the spot. We might try to drag you on to.
Yeah, I think something like that sounds good. I'm also on. I'm going on Test Kitchen Friday, and then like I said, we've got that public webinar Tuesday. Which again, that public webinar, I'm doing it because of Q&A. I can sit here and answer questions all day.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. Really, really great having you. Great job to our producers who came up. We were running out of questions, and boom, just turned it right on. Just filled up our bin. So great work by the producers to make that work, and great work by the panelists to keep the conversation moving forward. Remember, we have Andy Carluccio's on tomorrow. He's going to talk about Office Hours 2.0. It's deep. You want to be here? So he's doing some incredible things we've got a bunch of Zoom ISOs, like 20 people coming out of Zoom ISO into an ATEM switcher being run by Isadora, talking to all the, it's this giant Zoom machine that we're building. So he's going to talk a little bit about how that works tomorrow morning. So stay tuned for that and come in and ask your questions. All right, we're going to jump into after hours for the next 21 hours. That's what we do.